In an alternate world, King's Landing stands untouched, its towering spires gleaming under a peaceful sky. The Iron Throne, once a symbol of ruthless ambition, is claimed not by a conqueror, but by a queen who chose unity over destruction. Daenerys Targaryen, the breaker of chains, could have broken more than just her enemies. She could have broken the cycle of fire and blood that has plagued Westeros for centuries. What if she had chosen wisdom over vengeance? Could she have saved the Seven Kingdoms from their darkest fate? Or would her ideals have been her undoing? Daenerys Targaryen's journey was nothing short of legendary. Born to a fallen dynasty, she was thrust into a brutal world at a young age, fleeing across the lands of Essos, unsure of her future, but certain of one thing: her birthright. With fire in her blood and dragons by her side, Daenerys began her rise to power, first liberating the slaves of Slaver's Bay, then turning her eyes to the Iron Throne, her family's lost legacy. But as she marched westward toward Westeros, the journey took a toll. Friends became enemies, allies betrayed her, and loved ones were lost. Viserys, her cruel brother, Khal Drogo, her great love, and countless others fell victim to the brutality of the world she sought to conquer. Each death fueled the flames of vengeance within her. It was her right to rule, her destiny to reclaim the throne. With every step she took, vengeance grew as powerful a motivator as the love she once had for her people. But what if there had been another path? What if, instead of seeking to break her enemies, Daenerys chose to heal a fractured realm? What if she saw the potential for peace, not in bloodshed, but in wisdom? Could the heart of the breaker of chains beat in a different rhythm? Could compassion, not fire and blood, have shaped her as a ruler? This choice could change not only her destiny, but the fate of all Westeros. The turning point in Daenerys Targaryen's journey came not with the roaring fire of Drogon's flames, but in a quiet moment of clarity, one that would forever alter her destiny and that of Westeros. It was during the tense and precarious time before the battle for King's Landing. The Iron Throne loomed ahead, but so did the bitter realization that her path to it could mirror the mistakes of past Targaryens, an empire built on conquest, destruction, and a thirst for revenge. It was Jon Snow who first planted the seed of doubt in her mind. After learning the truth about his parentage, Jon, Daenerys' closest ally, stood before her, torn between loyalty to his queen and his growing concerns about her intentions. "The Iron Throne isn't worth the bloodshed, Dany," he implored, his voice low but full of urgency. "We can unite this kingdom, but only if we stand together. You don't have to be your father." Those words, spoken not as a challenge but as a plea, echoed in Daenerys' heart. For so long, her life had been defined by the void left by her father's madness. The desire to restore the Targaryen name and avenge the atrocities done to her family had been her driving force. But Jon's honesty, the honesty she so often avoided in herself, began to break through her walls. Tyrion Lannister, too, played a pivotal role in her shift. The hand of the queen, always thoughtful and strategic, cautioned her against the weight of blind vengeance. "You are better than this, Daenerys," he urged. "Think of what you can build with your power, not what you can burn. A ruler who builds, who unites, is remembered by history, not the ashes left behind." His words were a balm to her fractured heart, reminding her of the leader she could be, not the warlord she feared becoming. But it wasn't just her advisors who influenced Daenerys. Her internal struggle, the battle between her pain and her ambition, played out in the quiet hours of the night when no one else was around. She saw the faces of those she had lost, felt the sting of betrayal from Varys, and the heavy burden of her own actions. she realized that vengeance would not free her. It would only chain her further to the past. The war would never end if she continued to fight it in her father's shadow. The moment of decision came when Daenerys, standing atop Drogon's back, gazed down at the battlefield outside King's Landing. The fire was ready, but she hesitated. She remembered the countless innocents in Essos who had suffered under the hands of tyrants. This was her chance to end the cycle, to rewrite the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. For the first time, she understood that saving Westeros meant saving herself from becoming what she hated most. With a deep breath, Daenerys turned to Jon, Tyrion, and Varys, her closest confidants, and declared, "We do this together. I will not burn them. I will unite them." Her decision to embrace wisdom over wrath rippled through the ranks. The Unsullied, once ready to conquer, found new purpose in standing beside their queen for peace. The North, ever wary of outsiders, saw Daenerys' shift and began to warm to her cause. Even Cersei, always calculating, saw the threat in this new Daenerys. Not a queen who would tear down the walls, but one who would build them stronger. With her heart set on unity rather than destruction, Daenerys began to reshape the course of Westeros. With King's Landing now a distant goal, Daenerys Targaryen set her sights on what truly mattered, uniting the fractured Seven Kingdoms. No longer the conqueror, she sought to become the healer of a broken realm. Her approach was radically different from the fire and blood that had been her trademark. Where her predecessors saw only conquest, Daenerys saw diplomacy. Where others sought power through bloodshed, she sought unity through understanding. The North, cold and fiercely independent, had long resisted southern rulers. Jon Snow, now firmly by her side, was a key bridge between Daenerys and the Northern Lords, but even he knew that her work was far from easy. Sansa Stark, the Lady of Winterfell, held the deepest reservations about Daenerys' rule. "You may be a queen, but the North has its own way," she said coldly during a tense meeting in Winterfell's war room. The winds of history and betrayal had shaped Sansa into a cautious leader, unwilling to bend for any monarch. Daenerys didn't expect immediate trust, but she knew that building it would require more than promises. It would take action, symbolic gestures that demonstrated her sincerity. She chose to meet Sansa and the Northern Lords on their terms, offering them something no other Southern ruler had: autonomy. "The North will remain independent, with your customs, your laws, and your leaders," Daenerys declared in the Great Hall, her voice carrying authority. "But we will stand united against the storms ahead, for the future of all our children." At that moment, Daenerys' dragons, once instruments of fear, took on new significance. Drogon, the largest and most fearsome of the three, soared above Winterfell's walls, his wings creating a thunderous roar. The Northmen, unaccustomed to the sight of dragons so close, watched in awe. But Daenerys' words calmed their fear. "These creatures, my children, will not be wielded as tools of war. They are not for destruction, but for protection." Her declaration was more than symbolic. It was a promise that her rule would be about safeguarding, not conquering. Drogon, the symbol of fire and destruction, now became a symbol of protection, a guardian for those who trusted in her. Slowly, the frost began to thaw. Sansa, though still wary, began to see that Daenerys was different from the rulers who had tried to crush the North's spirit. Over time, a begrudging respect developed. Arya Stark, the fierce and independent warrior, saw in Daenerys a kindred spirit, someone who had fought against all odds for her place in the world. She came to respect Daenerys' desire for justice, even if her methods sometimes bordered on ruthlessness. The Stark sisters, though reluctant, began to support Daenerys. their loyalty growing as they witnessed the genuine change in her leadership style. Daenerys' message of unity reached beyond the north. With Tyrion Lannister's counsel, she sought to form new alliances with the houses of the Reach, the Stormlands, and Dorne, each having their own grievances, fears, and desires for power. Her diplomacy was a careful dance, balancing respect for tradition with a vision of shared prosperity. She promised Dorne that their culture would not be erased but celebrated as a part of a larger, unified realm. To the Reach, she promised fair trade, cooperation, and prosperity, offering her dragons as a force of peace, not war. To the Stormlands, she vowed to defend them from any threat, be it foreign or internal, and rebuild the realm together. Yet, not all responses were positive. Cersei Lannister, the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, had spent years strengthening her hold on the throne, and she was not prepared to relinquish it so easily. Upon hearing of Daenerys' new approach, Cersei's fury was palpable. "She is weak, and she will fail," Cersei scoffed to her inner circle. She would rather negotiate with traitors than burn them. In Cersei's eyes, Daenerys' decision to unite rather than conquer was an admission of weakness. But Daenerys had no interest in Cersei's games of thrones. She had already seen the toll such bloodshed took on her soul. Cersei would never understand. She was a product of the very thing Daenerys sought to change. However, Daenerys' peace-driven approach had its share of challenges. The moment of doubt came when she was alone in her chambers, reflecting on the weight of her decisions. She had fought for so long, so fiercely to reach this point. Was she wrong to think that peace could be achieved through words and unity, rather than the fire she had wielded for so long? Would the lords of Westeros truly follow her, or would they see her compassion as weakness? But her doubts were quickly silenced by the faces of her people, her allies, her friends, and the innocents she had sworn to protect. Tyrion's words came back to her. "You are not your father, Daenerys. You are better than this." His faith in her steadied her heart, and in that moment she knew that the course she had chosen was the only one that would ensure her legacy. Not as a destroyer, but as a savior. As the months passed, Daenerys' reputation spread across the Seven Kingdoms. People from every corner of the realm began to hope again. The once divided noble houses found common ground in her vision for the future. Cersei's disdain only deepened as Daenerys' influence grew, but it was clear that the tides were turning. The people of Westeros were no longer looking for a ruler who would scorch their land with fire. They sought a ruler who would build a future for them all. With Daenerys at the helm, alliances formed, broken friendships were mended, and hope spread across the realm. The Iron Throne, once a symbol of tyrannical power, now seemed like a seat for a leader who could heal rather than harm. Yet, even as peace took root in the heart of Westeros, a darker storm brewed in the north. The Night King's army was still marching, and the threat of the undead loomed ever closer. Would Daenerys' vision of peace survive the greatest test of all? The winds of winter howled louder than ever as the armies of the dead, led by the Night King, descended upon Westeros. The moment that every man, woman, and child had dreaded for centuries had arrived. And yet, despite the looming doom of the long night, Daenerys Targaryen's rule as the unifier of the Seven Kingdoms had ignited a flicker of hope. With dragons flying high and a united Westeros standing beside her, could they truly defeat the darkness? The first battle had already been fought in the hearts and minds of the people. But now came the true test. Would Daenerys, the queen who had sought peace, stand firm when the very survival of the living was at stake? The answer lay in the dragon's fire, in the alliances forged from blood and sweat, and in the sacrifices that would define her reign. Jon Snow, her trusted companion and ally, stood by her side in the war room of Winterfell. Tyrion Lannister, ever the strategist, was at the table, poring over maps and discussing tactics. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the coming battle pressing on them all. "We don't have enough time to regroup," Jon said, his voice low. "The Night King's army moves faster than we anticipated. If we don't strike soon, it could be too late for all of us." Daenerys stood tall, her eyes fixed on the map laid out before them. "We will strike together, Jon," she said, her voice filled with both authority and compassion. "The North will stand with us, and we will fight as one." Her words carried not just the weight of a queen's command, but the resolve of a woman who had faced the worst of what life could throw at her and had chosen to rise above it. Tyrion added, "We have one advantage, your dragons. The Night King's forces may be endless, but fire has always been a force of nature that they can't defeat. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion will give us a fighting chance. But it's not just fire that we need," Jon said, his eyes locked on Daenerys. "We need a strategy that works with our allies. Every house, every lord, must play their part." Jon's words struck a chord with Daenerys. She had spent so much time uniting the kingdoms through diplomacy, but in this battle, unity would take on a different meaning. It was not just the great houses of Westeros who would have to stand together, it was the people. The Unsullied, the Dothraki, the northern armies, and the Free Folk, all of them had to stand as one. The survival of the living depended on it. In the days that followed, Daenerys, Jon, and Tyrion traveled across Westeros to rally their forces. Daenerys herself visited the castles of the Vale and Dorne, speaking with the noble houses and convincing them that this was not just a battle for the North, but for all of humanity. She called upon the common people to fight for their homes, their families, their future. Her dragons flew over the battlefield, their wings beating like thunder, inspiring awe and fear in equal measure. Drogon, in particular, was a terrifying sight. But to Daenerys, he was not a weapon of destruction. He was her ally, a symbol of her will and of the power that could protect Westeros from the oncoming storm. And then came the day of the battle. The Great War had begun, and the armies of the living gathered at the heart of Winterfell. The Night King's forces were an endless sea of icy figures, whites, ice dragons, and even creatures more terrifying than anything the living had ever seen. But Daenerys did not waver. She rode Drogon into the skies above the battlefield, her eyes fierce and unwavering as she directed the dragon's fire upon the advancing whites. Drogon's flames rained down upon the dead like a cleansing fire, burning through them, though they seemed to rise again with every strike. The armies of the living, led by Jon and Sansa in the front lines, fought valiantly, but the onslaught of the undead seemed never-ending. Amidst the chaos, Daenerys fought from the front, her heart set on victory. She was no longer just the queen of Westeros. She was a leader of the living, a symbol of hope in the darkest of times. Tyrion, ever the tactician, directed troops and coordinated strikes, ensuring that the living's firepower was used efficiently. But Daenerys led the charge, diving into the heart of the battle with Drogon's flames cutting a path through the whites. The turning point of the battle came when the Night King, as cold and ruthless as ever, took to the skies himself, riding his own ice dragon. It was a spectacle unlike any the world had ever seen. Two dragons, one made of fire, the other of ice, clashing in a cataclysmic battle above the battlefield. Drogon's fiery breath met Viserion's icy frost, and the sky above Winterfell seemed to crackle with energy as the two dragons fought for supremacy. In this moment, Daenerys realized that her dragons were more than just weapons. They were symbols of her own inner battle. Could she keep the fire of justice and compassion alive while standing against the frozen heart of the Night King? Her dragons were more than beasts. They were an extension of her soul, and through them she could find the strength to win the war. With Drogon's fire intensifying, she made a crucial decision. She called upon Rhaegal and Viserion to come to her aid, sending them to flank the Night King's dragon, striking from all sides. The battle was fierce, with heroic moments from all corners of the battlefield. Jon Snow fought valiantly alongside the northern armies, leading them with honor and courage. Sansa, ever the strategist, ensured that Winterfell's defenses held strong, giving the living a fighting chance. Even Jaime Lannister, once a member of Cersei's army, stood beside Daenerys, fighting for the future of the realm. But as the battle raged on, Daenerys' resolve was tested. There was no easy path to victory, no clear solution that would save everyone. She had already sacrificed so much: her family, her peace, her very ideals. But in this moment, she understood that the cost of saving Westeros was the loss of something even greater: her humanity. Drogon's flames burned brightly, but they also consumed her soul. She knew that if she was to save the living, she would have to let go of the anger and hatred that had once driven her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the Night King's ice dragon fell, struck down by the combined firepower of Daenerys and Jon. The Night King, weakened by the loss of his dragon, descended to the battlefield, his blue eyes locking with Daenerys's. In that moment, she felt the full weight of the curse she had inherited. The fires of revenge, the need to conquer, all of it was meaningless now. She stood tall, her heart steady, as Drogon made the final strike, sending the Night King into the abyss of the cold. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. Many lives were lost, including some of Daenerys' most loyal allies. The survivors stood victorious, but they were changed. The North, once a land of endless winter, was now a realm that would never forget the sacrifices made in the name of unity. Though the long night had ended, Daenerys' ultimate challenge lay ahead, ruling the living. The battle against the dead had been won, but the realm was still fractured. Would her vision of a united Westeros survive the aftermath? Would the living accept her as their true queen? Or would old wounds and grudges threaten the fragile peace she had fought so hard to create? The long night had ended, but Daenerys Targaryen's greatest challenge had only just begun. With the threat of the Night King destroyed, Westeros lay in the wake of war. The realm was tired, physically, emotionally, and politically, and the once vibrant landscapes of the Seven Kingdoms now felt worn and fragile. Daenerys had united the people against the dead, but the real question was whether she could now unite them for a lasting peace. In King's Landing, Daenerys stood overlooking the city. The people cheered her, but Daenerys knew that applause in a time of war was not the same as loyalty in times of peace. With victory came new challenges. Old grudges, rivalries, and power struggles had been left unresolved by the defeat of the Night King. The noble houses, once divided, had pledged their loyalty to Daenerys, but it was clear that unity was fragile. While some, like Tyrion and Davos, offered her counsel, others, such as Sansa Stark, remained wary of her intentions. Sansa's quiet resistance was evident in every glance, her wariness reflecting the North's ever-present desire for independence. One evening, Sansa and Daenerys met in the courtyard of Winterfell, their dialogue laden with both respect and underlying tension. "Sansa," Daenerys began, trying to find common ground, "the North has always been strong. I will never ask you to sacrifice that strength, but we must stand together." Sansa's response was measured, but it carried weight. "The North's independence has always been our pride. It won't be given away easily, not even to a queen." Daenerys felt the sting of Sansa's words, but also recognized the truth in them. As much as she longed for unity, she realized that true peace would require patience, understanding, and compromise. Meanwhile, Cersei Lannister, despite her defeat, could not be underestimated. Her pride was bruised, but not broken. Behind closed doors she plotted, her ambition still burning bright. Her refusal to bow to Daenerys was a constant threat to the fragile peace the Targaryen queen was attempting to build. In this time of fragile peace, Daenerys faced the dilemma of balancing her ideals with the harsh realities of ruling. Compassion and strength, values she had long upheld, now had to be weighed against the pragmatism of keeping her throne. Daenerys often found herself lost in thought, unsure of whether the power she wielded would be enough to secure the future she envisioned for Westeros. One evening, Tyrion joined Daenerys in the Red Keep, offering his quiet wisdom. "The people see you as a savior, Daenerys," he said. "But they will test you. They will push you to decide what kind of queen you will be." Daenerys paused, staring at the flickering flame in front of her. "What kind of queen do you think I should be?" she asked, her voice a mix of vulnerability and determination. Tyrion looked at her, the weight of his words heavy. "The kind who listens as much as she commands. The kind who builds, not just with fire, but with understanding." His words echoed in her mind as she grappled with her next steps. She had built her power on fire and vengeance, but now it was time to build it on trust and diplomacy. As she held her ground, moments of doubt crept in. Had she made the right choice? Could she truly lead Westeros with the ideals she held so dearly, or was the weight of history too heavy to bear? Still, in her darkest moments, Daenerys found strength in her vision of a unified realm. Even as the challenges mounted, she remained determined. She had fought for this moment, for the people of Westeros, and no matter what happened next, she would not let their sacrifices go in vain. But as the tension simmered beneath the surface, Daenerys could not help but wonder, had she truly become the ruler Westeros needed, or had the fire that had once defined her consumed her in the end? In the days to come, her resolve would be tested more than ever. Would her heart, wounded by betrayal, driven by vengeance, be enough to guide her kingdom through the storm that was sure to come? Only time would tell. Daenerys Targaryen's journey through Westeros is a tale of immense triumph, profound loss, and the constant tension between power and mercy. In this alternate reality, where she chose compassion over fire, Daenerys would forever be remembered not just as the mother of dragons, but as a queen who saw beyond the flames of vengeance. She would stand as a beacon of hope in a world that so often traded in cruelty and bloodshed. But what would her legacy truly be? Would she be remembered as the savior who united the Seven Kingdoms and ended the cycle of destruction? Or would history view her as a dreamer, a ruler who failed to truly understand the complexities of Westeros, and thus let her ideals crumble under the weight of reality? Daenerys, in choosing to heal instead of harm, might have created a realm built on peace and unity. But peace requires constant effort, constant sacrifice, and constant vigilance. Could a ruler who had been forged in fire and blood truly lead a kingdom without leaning into those very forces? Or would her compassion be seen as a weakness, ultimately bringing about her downfall? As the Seven Kingdoms rebuild, her legacy would live on, not as a perfect hero, but as a figure who dared to defy the traditional ways of power. A queen who understood the true cost of leadership and chose a different path. What do you think? Could Daenerys have truly saved Westeros this way? Would she have been a hero, or just a dreamer lost in the Game of Thrones? Let us know in the comments below.